the help and presence, very welcome from the experts from the Community Plant Variety Right Office. Today we're going to focus on part 2, which will focus on the vegetatively propagated species. And we have the pleasure to have with us another examiner from the Community Plant Variety Office, Jens Wegner. Thank you very much, Jens, for being with us. It's a pleasure to be able to learn a couple of insights from your job, from your activities, and of course we hope that they're going to be useful for the participants after this webinar today. Before we start with the technical part of the webinar, as you know already if you followed the webinar yesterday, or if you haven't, I'm going to give you just a couple of information regarding the WebEx tool that we're using. The first is that, as you may already noticed, you are muted. That means that you cannot really speak or make noises or ask questions as well orally, but you're very welcome to ask questions. And as we did yesterday, I'm going to show you once again, we are going to show your questions in a Word document after the webinar. Well, in the question and answer part of the webinar, and I will read them loud, write them in, and Jens is going to answer to those questions, and we will discuss together about them. The first question that we always receive is this one here: when will we receive today's presentation slides? I have to prepare the follow-up email, and to do that I will have to cut a little bit the video and prepare it for you for the streaming. So I'm going to need a couple of hours probably, but I hope that the slides of today's and tomorrow presentation and yesterday's presentations may be sent to you until these afternoons, but before the weekend, so to say, so as soon as possible today. Also, before starting, I have to show you a couple of information regarding the help desk, but I will do that very quickly, as many of you were here yesterday. I don't want to bother you with useless administrative information. So we offer services online and on site. Today is one of them. We have a large offer of online webinars that you can see in the next slide, and you can click on and register yourself for. We have ambassadors in different European countries that may help you, for example, with translation or getting in touch with us. A large amount of publication online that may be used for knowledge, for learning, but also templates that may be downloaded, modified to your own needs. Finally, the most important service is probably the helpline, where you can ask your questions regarding intellectual property and intellectual property rights, and they will answer within 3 working days. All of those services are free of charge, so I really suggest you to give it a try and see how it goes, whether your experience is pleasant or not, and in case if it isn't, please just write your comments and your impressions. The impression and comments are very useful for us. That's why after this webinar and also after yesterday's webinar, you will receive a feedback form that we kindly ask you to fill in, in case you haven't done it yesterday as well. Those are the upcoming webinars. When you will receive the slide, you can just click on the webinars that you can see here and register for them within 3 weeks from the day where the webinar is going to take place. So now, for example, we have open importance for IP for SMEs and intellectual property and artificial intelligence, as well as IT management in Horizon 2020 with a special focus on MSCA. We're going to have a lot of webinars, so to say, until the end of the year, so you're very welcome to take part to them. Again, in case you should need or you should have questions for intellectual property rights outside Europe, we have our brother services that may help you to this purpose. Now, since I have already talked about that yesterday, and since I don't want to take any more time from our technical presentation, I would leave the word and the moderation rights back to the to our expert Jens. Just remembering you that the first part of the presentation is going to be again a general introduction, and we're going to have specific examples regarding vegetatively propagated varieties in the second part of the presentation. So thank you very much, and please, Jens, the floor is all yours. Thank you again for being here with us today.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome you to the webinar Technical Examination for Varieties applied for community plant variety rights, today with a focus on vegetatively propagated varieties. In the first part, as said, it will be a general information on the EU PVP system to explain how to file applications, some words on the technical examinations, the general parts, the DUS test, where and how it is done, the DUS reporting, and a little bit about CPVO and its examination officers. This part is fully identical to the webinar on seed-propagated varieties. In the second part, the focus is on technical protocols, the DUS test, how to assess distinctness, uniformity, and stability, reporting, and variety descriptions. This is largely identical to the one for seed-propagated varieties. However, all the examples chosen are vegetatively propagated varieties. There are some differences in the testing of distinctness in the method and on uniformity and stability. For the rest, it is also identical to seed-propagated varieties. Some general information on the PVP system in Europe. The plant varieties have their own system of protecting the intellectual property, and the rights granted are valid on the entire territory of all 28 member states of the European Union. The European system was established in 1994 with the adoption of the basic regulation, the Council Regulation 2100/1994. This regulation is based upon the UPOV Act of 1991. And in 2005, the EU became the first international organization being part of the of UPOV. Under the European system, all varieties of all genera and species may be subject to protection. In our understandings, mushrooms are also plants. I know this would be heavily contested by taxonomists, as mushrooms are not part of the plant kingdom, but here they fall under the system of plant variety protection. So far, we have dealt with varieties belonging to more than 2,200 species. And out of the nearly or more than 50,000 rights granted, more than 28,000 are still in force. Some words to the office. We are based in Angers. On the left side, you see the main building of the office. The CPVO is an official European agency with independent legal status. We are set operational since 1995, and we are fully self-financed, meaning the only source of income we have are the fees, and that also explains why the fees are actually quite substantial. We talk about this later. Under the European system, there is, of course, we work on the basis of the basic regulation, this one being based on the UPOV Convention of 1991. And for vegetatively propagated crops, there are two implementing rules of importance, the proceedings regulations and the fee regulation. Under the system, you have one application, one procedure, one technical examination, and in the end, one decision to have a right that is immediately applicable in all 28 member states without any additional verification or approval step by the member states. In parallel to the European system, there are also the national systems, and the applicant has the choice to go for either European protection or national protection. The only conditions to be complied with to obtain a community plant variety rights are: the variety must be distinct, uniform, and stable, in short, DUS. You will hear that abbreviation again and again. And the variety needs to be novel and must have a suitable denomination. Once the rights are granted, they are valid for 25 years, and in case of vine and tree varieties for 30 years. Here, an overview on how we process applications. The application arrives at the register, where, as the name suggests, the application is registered. After verification, the receipts are sent out, an application date is attributed, and the application is published in the official gazette. From the moment the application is published, the provisional protection becomes effective. The initial check also involves the case holder, that is the second person in the procedure, and he or she, always a person with a technical background, does some technical checks. If there are some elements missing, they are communicated together with the receipt sent by the registry. Once the application is complete and valid, the case holder arranges for the technical examination, or where possible, arranges for a report takeover. The technical examination is conducted by the examination office. The examination office is not part of the CPVO. These are separate entities. The case holder also has a task to monitor the technical examination and in the end to prepare a decision. In parallel to the technical examination, the denomination assistant checks the suitability of the denomination and publishes it if it's considered to be suitable. And in the end, a committee decides on the application. How to file an application? This will be done either online via our website. When you go on our website, you find this field. Clicking there, you file online, or you can do it on paper, and all forms required you will also find on the web page. The advantage of filing online is not only a price difference. The application fee for online applications is 450 euros. For paper applications, it's 650 euros. Other advantages are you can send off the application immediately, meaning you get an earlier application date, and you can get an application date even on a day when the office is closed, like a Sunday. Furthermore, if you do it online, there is a pre-check for some inconsistencies, avoiding that you have some invalidating elements in the application documents, at least for some parts. The online system is available in English, Dutch, French, Spanish, and German. You can file the application in any other language. However, the forms are only available in these languages. The office works in all 22 languages of the European Union, and it is for the applicant to choose the language of the procedure. If you file online, you go on a personal space called My PVR. This is a secured website. You get access to all your documents of the file, and it will be the communication channel with the applicant. If you file online, for having a lower application fee, it also means you do not get any paper communications from us. You have to check your emails regularly. Once you file an application, as said, you will get a receipt from the office, and that can be 3 different forms. If you get a document called R form, it means the application is valid and complete. An application date has been attributed. If you get an R form observation, means the application is valid but not complete. Some elements are missing. If they are submitted in time, the application process can go on. If they are not submitted in time, we have to refuse the application. If you get a no form, it means the application is not valid. Some important elements are missing. If you don't remedy in time, then after a month, it will be considered not filed. If fees remain unpaid, the initially attributed application date will be removed. If it continues to be not paid, in the end, also this application gets the status not filed. If you don't have an application, the application is not published, and you have no possibility to challenge the decision taken by the office, meaning you cannot appeal that. Some technical elements that are looked at when checking the application. It must be possible for us to identify the botanical taxon to which the variety belongs. Normally, we need the genus and the species name. In some cases, we have to go beyond the species name. If it's an interspecific hybrid, we need to know the species being involved. We need to know, furthermore, the information on earlier applications and earlier technical examinations carried out. This is mainly for the purpose to see whether we can already take over a report or whether we have to do the technical examination on our own. We need to have information on the geographical origin, on the breeding history, a technical description that comes in form of a technical questionnaire. The photo is for all fruit and ornamental applications obligatory. We need to have information on similar varieties, if there are any, and special conditions for the test. Here an overview on the fees for the technical examination. For vegetatively propagated crops, these are the potatoes, and the great majority is the fruit and the ornamental crops. And the fees vary from 1,730 euros going up to 3,350 euros per growing cycle. This means for an apple variety, usually tested for 4 years, the fee of 3,050 euros has to be paid 4 times. If the application documents are complete and valid and we don't find any impediment to go on with the application processing, we have to arrange for the technical examination. This has to be done in one of our examination officers being entrusted by the Administrative Council in order to check whether the variety is really distinct, uniform, and stable. The examination officers use technical protocols for the conduct of the growing trial, which are adopted by the Administrative Council again. If a technical examination has been carried out in the frame of another procedure, such as a national application prior to the CPVO application, we don't have to repeat the technical examination. We can take over the report. In such case, there is no fee to be paid for carrying out the technical examination. Instead, there is an administrative fee of 320 euros. Here, an overview of where all the examination offices are located. You will notice they are spread around all over Europe, but please bear in mind that the majority of these offices are specialized. They do not test all crops. For ornamental crops, in the great majority, we have centralized testing. For fruit crops, we have often 2 or 3 examination offices to choose for the conduct of a technical examination. If you want to know which examination office can carry out the technical examination, we have a special section on our homepage that is called the S3 publication. This is an overview of all examination offices entrusted for the species concerned. This information is relevant for you because in your application documents you can express a wish where the technical examination shall be carried out. And of course, if you express a wish for an examination office which is not entrusted to do the technical examination, we cannot take your preference into account. There are other elements we look at when we attribute an examination to an examination office. This is the geographical origin of the variety, basically to ensure that the climatic conditions are suitable. The origin of the applicant to facilitate an easy visit to the growing trial. And of course, we need to take into account the experience of an examination office with that crop. Another important section on our homepage is the S2 publication. S stands for Special Gazette, 2nd edition. Here you find all information on the submission requirements for the material. Here I took the example of Pelargonium zonale. You can see it will be tested in Germany by the Bundessortenamt. One growing cycle is regularly foreseen. Here you have information on the fee. It falls under fee group 12, the period when to submit material, and the kind of material that needs to be submitted. You have also here information on the closing date, meaning any application arriving by that day will be tested in the subsequent year. If the application arrives after that day, the technical examination will be delayed by another year. The technical examinations are conducted according to technical protocols. They are also published on the homepage. These under the section Technical Protocols. And it is helpful to look into these protocols if you want to understand how a variety description in the end needs to be interpreted. During the procedure, an applicant has typically contact with at least 3 different persons of the CPVO. Once the registry in the beginning, then the technical expert for all technical aspects, and the denomination assistant with regard to everything that concerns denominations. What he hears from the technical expert is it's a request to send material. This is based upon this information already submitted it's provided in the S2. It is helpful that an applicant has familiarized themselves with this information provided there, but already at the time when he files an application. During the procedure, common information or notifications received from the technical expert or from the case holder is information on the non-arrival of plant material. In this case, we usually can give a time extension of a few days up to a few weeks, but never more. We inform if there are problems with the quality of the plant material submitted. If this is right at the beginning, we often can offer to submit a new sample. And we inform the breeder or the applicant on any problem discovered during the test. In this case, we only can invite the applicant to see the problem to discuss the matter with the examiner, but at this stage, it's no longer possible to exchange the material already submitted. Generally, it means no news is good news. If you don't hear from us, it means the material has arrived and no problems have occurred. In that case, you only get reports from us. That is either an interim report at the end of each growing cycle. There we inform you on the progress of the DUS test, or a final report if the test is completed. If it's a positive report, you also get a variety description. If it's a negative report, you get details on the reasoning why it was a negative report. Normally, these reports issued by the examination officers are forwarded quickly. However, if we have some questions, the CPVO has some questions on the report, we may ask the examination office to provide some further details. And if we consider it not sufficient to take a decision, well, we may even ask the examination office to carry out another year of DUS test. Here an overview of all the communication channels. There's on the one hand side the applicant or his representative. On the other hand is the examination office. In the middle is the CPVO. Normally, there is no direct communication between the examination office and the applicant. It also always goes via the CPVO, simply because the CPVO is responsible for the running of the procedure. What the applicant hears from the CPVO is a request of material, informing on any problems, reports, gets the decisions, and if this third party has lodged an objection, of course, the applicant is informed on any objections. Between the office and the examination office, we order the testing, we are informed on problems, we get reports, and if need be, we take a decision that samples need to be kept. There are only a few instances where a direct communication between the examination office and the applicant and vice versa is admissible. For instance, for issues that need immediate reaction from the applicant, such as an infection where the plant material needs to be destroyed, possibly be destroyed within 24 hours. If the applicant wishes to visit the growing trial, he has the right to do that. So he can take an appointment straight away with the examination office. We don't need to be informed on this. And also if the applicant wants to take a DNA sample for analysis of his own material, he cannot take DNA samples of other varieties, but of his own material. And the last slide on the general part of the presentation is an overview on how the CPVO and the examination offices share the different parts of the procedure. The technical examination office is in charge of the conduct of the technical examination, to report to the CPVO and to maintain the reference connection. The CPVO, on the other side, has to administer the system, take care of all communications with the applicant, take the decision, and to pay the examination. Now we come to this second part, the more focused part on vegetatively propagated varieties. First, a comparison of how we conduct the DUS test for seed and vegetatively propagated varieties. For vegetatively propagated varieties, this is usually done indoor or outdoor. For seed propagated varieties, virtually always under outdoor conditions, meaning the environment is not controlled. For vegetatively propagated varieties, if they are grown indoors, we work under controlled conditions, meaning that often we can live with one growing cycle. For seed propagated, we have always at least 2 growing cycles. To be noted, for trees, for instance, even though we have only 1 growing cycle, it may take several years. For the majority of ornamentals, we are indeed able to finish the growing cycle within 1 year. For seed-propagated varieties, there is a living reference collection maintained at the examination office. For vegetatively propagated varieties, this is mostly not the case. The reference varieties will be ordered each time when there's a need. Seed-propagated varieties have often an important genetic heterogeneity. For vegetatively propagated varieties, this is not the case. Also, therefore, the methods of observations are different. For seed-propagated varieties, they are mostly measured and statistical analysis has to be done. For vegetatively propagated varieties, the assessment is done mostly visual and the analysis is based on notes. This has some consequences on the conduct of the DUS test. It means it's much easier and can be done much faster. The technical examination follows technical protocols. Here is an example of the citrus technical protocol. For all protocols, they specify, they all crop specific. They provide details on how to conduct the trial design, the number of plants required, repetitions, which are hardly ever needed for vegetatively propagated varieties, but the decision standards are fixed. The list of characteristics for all crops, actually, we use mostly morphological characteristics, only a very few physiological characteristics, such as resistances. Furthermore, the method of assessing the characteristics are prescribed for each characteristics, meaning whether it's a visual assessment, whether it has to be measured, and it is fixed on at which moment the observations have to take place. The characteristics observed, I mentioned already that these are mostly morphological characteristics. That's simply because they are very easy to assess, with the consequence that this keeps the DUS test, reduces the costs. So before we consider characteristics, we have to be sure that this results from a given genotype. It must be consistent and repeatable in a particular environment. There must be variation between varieties. If this is not the case, then there is no point in looking at this. It must be possible to define and recognize the characteristic. Of course, it must be possible to allow compliance with the uniformity standards and with the stability standards. If this is not the case, there is no point in looking at these characteristics. The characteristics we have in the protocols do not need to have any value or merit. Set usually morphological and sometimes physiological characteristics. This is simply because they are easy to assess and we can distinguish varieties. Yield is, as such, is not a characteristic. However, it can be concluded sometimes, like for apples, for instance, in the number of fruit and size or weight of the fruit. So it has an indication, but yield as such is not a characteristic. It also highly depends on the method of cultivation. How to read in variety description. You will notice that the plant is broken down into its part, and you will see a list of plant parts and a list of characteristics followed by some relative values and numbers. Seeing it like this, it is not really meaningful. In order to understand this, you have to consider the purpose of a variety description and to have a look at the technical protocol in order to give some meaning to these notes. First, the purpose of a variety description. First, it defines the realm of protection, and the definition of a variety says it is defined by the expression of the characteristics resulting from a given genotype. And the second purpose is to substantiate the assessment of clear distinctness from any other variety. That the definition of the variety definition of a variety says it must be, or it can be clearly distinguished from any other plant grouping by the expression of at least one characteristic. In the technical protocol, you will find three types of characteristics: the qualitative characteristics, the quantitative characteristics, and the pseudo-qualitative characteristics. The distinction is important because they are assessed in different ways and must be understood in different ways. First, the qualitative characteristics. They are expressed in a discontinuous state. Here we have an example of the leaf type of clematis, where you have simple ternate, biternate, or triternate leaf. Each stage can be clearly separate. Then each state represents its own node, its own state of expression, and they are not influenced by the environment. The second group are the quantitative characteristics. They are expressed in a one-dimensional continuous linear scale. The expression of these characteristics is highly impacted by the environment. The third one, the pseudo-qualitative characteristics, they are expressed partly in a continuous state, but in more than one dimension. Here we have the example of flower color. You see it from red to pink, or from red to white via orange, because you have the yellow here, the pink or purplish. There may be something like blue on the other side. For the assessment of distinctness, a variety shall be deemed distinct if it is clearly distinguishable by the expression of the characteristics resulting from a genotype from any other variety who's a matter of common knowledge on the date of application. As said, it refers to common knowledge. When is a variety to be considered being of common knowledge? If it firstly was commercialized, if a detailed description was published, if an application for plant breeders' rights was filed, if an application for an official register was filed that concerns less the vegetatively propagated varieties, with the exception of potatoes and some fruit varieties, but for ornamentals, such registers do not really exist. But if there's living plant material available in publicly accessible plant collections, this may be the case, and all those have to be considered in the distinctness test. The assessment of distinctness requires that there must be a clear difference between varieties. Here we see the example of plant height, the number of varieties differing all in plant height, but between neighboring varieties, the difference may not be clear. The second condition is for assessing distinctness, the distinctness or the difference must be consistent. Again, with plant height, the variety B is in each year they are grown taller than variety A, even though the absolute height of variety A is not the same. When assessing quantitative characteristics, they are assessed, the expression of the characteristics is divided into classes representing nodes. The examiner looks at the height, and then if the variety is in between, they have to is attributed to one or the other class. Then one class means one node. The measured values will correspond to a certain class. The first and the last class may be open classes. Depending on the range of expression, between 3 and 9 classes are created, into which the characteristics or the varieties are sorted into. In case of plant height, it goes from very small to very large. We often hear the notion of clear difference, and then we refer to the two nodes notion, meaning a clear difference. So if you have a variety being in that range, it may be shortly before 4.5. And the next one is just after the 4. It is not clearly distinct, but if it falls in that range and the other one is in that range, you have at least one node in between. So if you have 2 nodes difference, you definitely have a clear difference. As mentioned before, quantitative characteristics are highly impacted by the environment. Therefore, measured values are not really meaningful or not really comparable. For that reason, to bypass that problem, the candidate varieties are compared to example varieties. We have here the candidate variety under the conditions of country A. And here we have 3 different example varieties. We see that the candidate variety corresponds having a leaf length of 20 centimeters. That corresponds to the example variety here in the middle. In the country B, the leaf length is considerably higher. It's the same candidate variety, here 30 centimeters, but under the different conditions, also the leaf length of the example varieties is higher. So you can, even though you cannot compare these values from country A to country B, but you can compare them to the example variety. In country A, it corresponds to this variety, and in country B, this variety again corresponds to the example variety in the middle. Then getting back to the technical protocol, here we have the characteristic leaf size, which is a quantitative characteristics. We have the classes from 1 to 9 with the, fruit size with the nodes from 1 to 9, and the fruit size from very small to very large. To each one, an example variety is given, and if you have a candidate variety where the fruit size is attributed the node 4, for instance, you know the fruit size is roughly the same as for the apple variety Alcmene. As for the pseudo-quantitative characteristics, the expression is partly continuous, but in more than one dimension. This is not only true for colors, but also for shapes. We have the example of leaf shapes. You see, they are spread out, in the case, the example here of ficus, spread out in a square like this, attributing the leaf length to see the broadest part is in the middle. Here it's further to the top, or the broadest part is here to the bottom, and here the broader part is on this side, it's to the top. It goes on this side. You will notice that even though certain leaf shapes are neighboring in the square, they are similar, but they may differ in nodes considerably. This means from the node, you cannot conclude on distinctness. You need to look into the square to see, oh, are they possibly close or not? Even though you may have 2 varieties where you have 3 nodes in between, it is not sure that they are clearly distinct. Another point that is fixed in the technical protocol is the method of observation for the characteristics. You do it either visually or you do it via measurements. If you do it, and furthermore, you can do it, give a node to a group of plants, meaning the whole plot, or you measure or assess single plants. Then we come to the assessment of uniformity. A variety is considered to be uniform if it is subject to the variation that may be expected from the particular features of propagation, is sufficiently uniform, which includes the expression of other varieties, expression of characteristics. This means that the particular features of propagations are taken into account. The uniformity assessment is based upon the expression of the characteristics, and before we assess distinctness, we must of course be sure that the variety is uniform. If we find already that the variety is not uniform, we will not go to a distinctness assessment. For vegetatively propagated variety, as they are genetically identical, we can expect a very low level of variation. For qualitative characteristics, a single observation is sufficient. For pseudo-qualitative characteristics, it is also a single observation sufficient for the whole plot. For quantitative characteristics, it is either a single measurement of the whole group, or in some cases, we have to measure each plant, followed by usually simple statistic analysis for vegetatively propagated varieties. We apply for vegetatively propagated varieties the uniformity standards of 0.1% of acceptance probability with uniformity standards of 0.1% with an acceptance probability of at least 95%. It means for a trial with 6 plants or less than 6 plants, we do not allow an off-type. If we have 6 to 35 plants in the trial, this is for the great majority of the case of the varieties the case, we allow 1 off-type, and if we have up to 82 plants, we allow 2 off-types. The third aspect that is assessed, that is stability, and this means a variety should remain unchanged in the expression of the characteristics after repeated propagation. Here we see the variety, the original material. After each propagation, the variety remains the same, does not change. If a change is noted, like here for flower color, this variety would be considered not stable. For vegetatively propagated varieties, stability is normally not tested. If they are uniform, they are assumed to be stable. Only in case of doubt, we actually do a test. If the technical examination is finished, a report is issued certifying that the variety is distinct or not, is uniform or not, and is stable. If it's uniform, we usually assume it is stable. If the positive report is issued, a variety description will be added. Here we give an example and little extract for a variety, a Dahlia variety, Mystic Sparkler. You see for the characteristic leaf glossiness is assessed weak to medium with note 4. As such, it is probably not very meaningful, so we come back to the technical protocol to see what weak to medium actually means for leaf glossiness. Note 4, so you can see in the technical protocol, it is somewhere between red fox and papagaya. If it comes to the texture of the surface of the leaf, it's noted with note 4, weakly rugose. Looking at the technical protocol, meaning this is comparable to the variety Gamma Ventura. There should be another slide. Oops. At the end of the second of the variety description, you always have a chapter's information on similar varieties. We have here the example of the chrysanthemum variety, say Nerva. The protocol contains 89 characteristics. There was a similar variety identified, say Taylor. Distinctness was established on 3 characteristics: in the predominant shape of the leaf base. The candidate variety has rounded leaf shape at the base. The similar variety cordate. The flower head. The length of the peduncle for the candidate is medium to long. The similar variety short to medium. And for the flower head, the density of ray flowers, it is sparse to medium, whereas for the most similar variety, it's medium to dense. And finally, some information to our databases. The office has two major databases accessible to the public. The first one is the database on applications and titles in force. You find two sections, the My PVR section. This is the space for the applicants and title holders. And you have the general section where anyone can search for applications filed and titles in force. The second important database is the variety finder. This is a database containing variety, not only variety denominations, but it's used to check variety denominations, but you find also varieties registered virtually all over the world. You can use it to do a pre-check for the suitable denomination, but you get also some idea on where a given variety is protected in other parts of the world. As far as this information concerns other authorities, of course, we cannot guarantee correctness of this information, but at least it is an important first indication. Then finally, I should like to draw your attention to the UPOF distance learning course if you want to know more about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jens, for your presentation. It's been very interesting to hear also the other side of the propagation, so the vegetatively propagation techniques. I'd like to ask to our participants to ask for the question that perhaps you might have from yesterday that popped out during your sleep tonight, for example, and we are here to answer to those questions as well. So you're very welcome to do so. I will take back for a second the moderation. There we go, to show the slide. As I told you, you're going to receive the slides of today and yesterday as soon as possible, and we will work for that so that you can spend the weekend checking out the slides of today and yesterday's presentation. We are waiting for those questions. I would have a small questions. I've always, also yesterday, I have asked about the timing of the examination. So we could draw that when possible, the examination of the vegetative propagation varieties is a little bit quicker, unless we're talking about trees or fruit varieties, than the seed propagating varieties examination.
That's true. For
and
most
are there other species that could be taken into account, that could be examined both with seed varieties, seed propagating exam or test, and vegetatively propagated test, or are they not?
There are indeed varieties propagated by both means. Of course, if it's usually not the same variety, but if you do, actually, you can, if a variety can indeed, seed propagated varieties usually often can also be propagated by vegetative means. But normally a variety is bred for one or the other propagation purpose.
All right, so it's up to the purpose that, for example, a breeder would like to do with it. So I don't see at the moment any question. We can wait another 5 minutes. Maybe all the questions were asked yesterday during Anna's webinar, but still. Those questions also from yesterday are going to be available in the recording of the webinar. that means that you're going to be able to see to all those questions and hear what it was answered. But of course, it's, in my opinion, much better to ask directly to the expert when we have the chance. Of course, into so near webinars in terms of time, perhaps all the questions have exhausted, so to say, yesterday, but still you have a grace period, so to say, of 2 minutes to bring your question to the attention of Jens. And I will read them loud as soon as I receive them. Also, one thing I'd like to confirm is that I am able to send the before mentioned TGP documents from the office. So there's a couple of also interesting material that you're going to receive after the webinar has taken place. And now that it comes to my mind, I would also have another question, if it's possible, Jens, I'd like to ask as well. We have talked about today and yesterday about the procedures. For example, if there is an infection on the plant itself might be destroyed.
Yes.
And we were talking about procedures instead for keeping the material. I didn't really understand what does that mean.
In case, especially if there's a negative report issued, or if there is an object on the ground of the right, one of the parties may lodge an appeal afterwards once we have taken a decision, and then keeping the material is, or the material is kept for several purposes. First, to have proof or some evidence in case there is appeal, or if the Board of Appeal orders an additional year of testing.
All right.
So that you have the material available.
All right. So it's really like keeping alive, so to say, as well.
Yes, yes, as far as possible, yeah.
All right, all right. So I see there are no new questions, and excuse me, there is one. It has come while I was asking my question. I'm gonna write it down very quickly. It is, why do we call the right PVP and not plant breeders right?
There are indeed both terms exist. PVP stands for plant variety protection or plant variety rights, and the other term is plant breeders' rights. The term plant breeders' rights is, for instance, found in the UPOV Convention. In the European Basic Regulation, we talk about plant breeders' rights. They are fully synonymously. The philosophy behind is plant breeders' rights. A right is granted to the breeder. Plant variety rights means the right is granted for a given variety. But as said, they are used fully synonymously.
All right. I see. Thank you very much for the answer. And yes, that was another question has arrived. So it's just an administrative question. This one here, whether a certificate may be sent or not. If you request it, I can send certificate for participation for the webinar. You're welcome. So there we go. I've we are actually perfectly in time because it's 11:30. So I thank, first of all, of course, the experts that was today with us, Jens. Thank you very much for being here and for the all interesting and useful information that we could learn.
Welcome.
And as I said, you're going to receive as soon as possible the presentation. In the meanwhile, I'm going to wish you personally and in video and audio a lovely weekend and a nice Friday afternoon, in the hope that you don't have so much to do this afternoon and you can start very well for the weekend. Otherwise, we're going to hopefully meet regarding the topic of plant varieties once again on the 13th of December. We're going to come up with the new event announcement very soon. Or if you're interested in other topics that I showed you before, I saw a couple of registration have come in. You can gladly come to our webinars. You're very welcome, and from our point of view, to take part to such webinars. With that, I would close today's presentation, and I would thank you once again very much for having been with us. Thanks and goodbye.
Bye.